And in discussing education, we can think about what Martin Luther King Jr. says about it. Education must also train one for quick, resolute, and effective thinking. To think incisively and to think for one's self is very difficult. We are prone to let our mental life become invaded by legions of half-truths, prejudices, and propaganda. At this point, 1947, even then, at this point, I often wonder whether or not education is fulfilling its purpose. Quote, if we are not careful, our colleges will produce a group of close-minded, unscientific, illogical propagandists consumed with immoral acts. Be careful, brethren. Be careful, teachers. Unquote. All right, so to get started, what's going on with modern education? Good, bad, no? Good, bad, ugly? Can it be improved? Can it not? Is it fine? Let's think about it. Modern education has problems. It's a failure, as a lot of people know. Not all of it. Some people say they have a blanket condemnation of modern education, and that's irrational. Some people say it's all well, and that's irrational. Some of it, a lot of it, is based on bad fundamentals. That's the thing that's causing it to fail. It's been known for a long time too. There was a documentary done on, CBS, ABC, NBC in the 80s. It used to be on YouTube, can't find it anymore. It was about problems with education. Stuff's been written about it, this and that. Everybody knows it, books about it. Why Johnny can't read, why Johnny can't add. There's books written by John Gatto about education, and so on and so forth. People give TED talks about it, but it's been known before then, way back, 1890s maybe, 1940s. People knew that something was going on in some places in the US, not in a blanket way with everyone. To say every teacher nowadays is bad is ludicrous, laughable, illogical, divorced from reality, non-factual. It's like some fantasy, someone's like lost in their own head with some like fantasy. It's like crazy insanity, clearly. Some teachers are doing great. They need to be praised and mentioned and proclaimed and appreciated and celebrated, not dismissed wholesale because, quote unquote, modern education is failing. I think it's actually evil to do so. That's disdaining, showing contempt for a great person who's doing work. Totally wrong to say all education is bad when it's not, is a violation of logic, a violation of fact, and because it deals with humans, it becomes unethical and immoral. Someone should say, as I said, maybe some or much of modern education is a failure, is evil, or whatever, however they want to phrase it, whatever category they use, however they classify it cognitively, morally, epistemologically, philosophically. Cool, but it applies to some, which includes most, when you're doing none, some, all. But it does not apply at all to all. It's an invalid induction. Violates the rules of thought, violates logic, violates good thinking, contradicts what we know. And as I say, because it's about humans, it becomes unethical. But there are some problems with education. And it's not going to happen by, like some TED Talks, people who give TED Talks say, like, more creativity or imagination. It's like, you can have as much imagination as you want, but if you ain't in touch with reality, it ain't going to help you survive. It ain't going to get you to the truth. It's useless. imagination is helpful to people only if we keep it tied to the world. Otherwise, you get lost in imagination, ignore the world. You know, when you go far on that, that's what's classified properly as insane. And that applies, only to humans. Animals, most all of them, unless there's some conditions I don't know about, but most all of them, like when they get rabies, they can have some issues. Some of them, I don't know how it affects their psychology and neurology, but humans can be insane or crazy, and that happens when your conceptual aspect gets very detached from your perceptual. Like when you think a red leaf is a zombie from The Walking Dead coming to attack you, or a devil or something like that. Totally out of touch with reality. But I think we can learn some things about what we actually need to do for education by looking at what Martin Luther King Jr. said, for example. Some people at Johns Hopkins talk about some of the same thing. Johns Hopkins University Medical School. Some people in neuroscience or whatever. I'll put a link in the description field. But some of them, best medical school in the country, if not the world. Top students come there. It's not the best because they get low quality students, people who haven't learned much. If they're going there, I think we can reason validly to say they must be highly educated and intelligent. Yet, some people there, Casadevall, forgot his name, Professor Casadevall, and dang, the name's not coming to me right now. I had her on a podcast interview. I can kind of hear her voice and see her face, and the name kind of rhymes, but I'm not getting the name itself on my tongue. But it'll be in the show notes. But they say at that school that students come in not knowing critical thinking, not knowing how to really evaluate things, scientific claims, logically. They didn't have broad context for it. They didn't know epistemology. And, people talk about, there's silly little videos saying no one knows critical thinking nowadays and it's all dead, which is ludicrous too. The title, clickbait, but insofar as a claim, that's stupid, illogical, irrational, obviously, contradiction on the face of it. But, as a title, it gets people's attention. Just like Spock in Star Trek can be however the creators want him to be. But in terms of reality, Spock is not an advocate of reason. By denying his own nature, denying what his consciousness is like, oh man, there's fundamental contradictions of logic and fact right there. I have emotion and I want to stifle it. That means someone's denying one's own nature. That's one thing reasoning is about, knowing what the nature of something is and its cause-effect relationships. If you try to stifle the nature of something, that's not being logical and rational, that's being illogical and irrational and trying to deny reality and claim you can make things be the way you want. By pretending it doesn't exist, it's okay. And that's what he's doing with his own nature. That's illogical in the real world. That is not logical. Like I say, in the show, they can do what they want. It's a work of fiction. Big deal. We think about it and all that. But, in the real world, it's a no. But if we look at what Martin Luther King Jr. said back in the 40s, we get better ideas of how to improve education. Not, like I say, by imagination. Because imagination is useless if it isn't tied to the real world. And some people say, oh, so-and-so, they got these videos on YouTube, it's going to transform education in the flipped classroom. Nonsense. If you get the same bad epistemology, nonsensical stuff, put it on the internet, it's just a different version of the same thing. It is not a revolution, you know? All that could do is help bad ideas spread faster, as we know the internet does, you know? That's one thing it shows people don't properly, because, you know, we're not trained in like logic and thinking as we should be in context, so people don't think about that. Oh, we got these videos, it's going to transform education. Well, and then people know for a fact that bad information gets spread, and we got to be careful about it, that fads get spread, that people go on the internet and lie and hate and spread such nonsense instead of being good human beings, you know? Like, why can't you just shut up and help somebody? Be nice, be helpful, offer advice, offer to talk. Say, hey, I love your opinion on this and this and this, but hey, we disagree on this, you know? Instead of being little hating nobodies, cowards of thought, you know? They can't engage in intellectual combat, so they just engage in total cowardice with such comments like that. But putting the same thing, same bad epistemology on the internet is not going to help. If there's something quote unquote broken in education, if it's going to be fixed, then having it in books and on the internet doesn't help. Whether it's in language on paper, written language, or it's in spoken language, the same thought process is behind it. You know, you got to be able to abstract away from that and not get all carried away. Whoa, it's so different. Everything's different about it. It's spoken instead of written. No, words come from thought. It's a thought process that determines the meaning of words and whether a particular person has any meaning to something or not. People can say the same things. They can use the word dog or epistemology or logic or induction, yet have a totally, radically, fundamentally, broadly, deeply different understanding of it. Some people having no understanding at all. Some a lot. Some different degrees of it. But putting it on the internet, claiming we need to be more creative, or some of these other little silly things, making it fun, non-essentials. There are things you can do, but only if you get your epistemology right. And that's exactly what, you know, and this isn't like I'm doing something new, this is unprecedented, where if someone says they've never heard anything like this, it's because they haven't studied history. You haven't studied science, the philosophy of science, the history of science. It's a failure of our education, not some idea to be, you know, it's a failure of our education that makes some people not know this. The fact that people haven't heard it, some people, does not mean it's wrong or weird or whatever. It is a fact in the historical record that Galileo and Newton figured out how science should be done and got it done right, not because they were superior or had some magic insight or whatever. People before them two were very intelligent. The difference was their philosophy. Galileo and Newton, especially Galileo, explicitly studied Aristotle and put science on a philosophic foundation of Aristotle's thought. It's in the historical record. Galileo said it himself, so on and so forth. Galileo studied Aristotle's logic and knew it very well. Newton developed off that. Newton said induction was valid, as opposed to a lot of the people nowadays who don't know what they're talking about and try to claim that induction is not. Newton is much more researched and knowing and understanding about induction. Look at how well he used it. I'm going to go with him way before I'm going to go with some of the people nowadays who've never done anything in their lives, haven't studied much philosophy or logic, and try to claim that induction's invalid, nonsensical. Besides, to say induction is invalid is an induction. That is saying, they're trying to hide it and sneak it in by not using the word all, but it's implied. All inductions are invalid. That is a generalization. And to claim that no inductions are valid, as they're really trying to say, means that the generalization, no induction is valid, is itself invalid, And there's all kinds of other stuff too. Just ludicrous. But Newton knew induction was valid, got that from Aristotle. Galileo explicitly followed Aristotle. And Galileo, in disputing with some scholastics did not get the essence and the fundamentals of Aristotle. They just blindly memorized some stuff, didn't really get it. And ignorantly reading some Aristotle, and then nowadays some people blame it on Aristotle, although lots of modern people, lots of ancient people from Greece and all that believe the same thing. People want to proclaim one person and badmouth Aristotle when these other people did the exact same thing. They had the same beliefs about the universe. It's not like Aristotle had this false belief and everyone else had modern physics and knew about electricity and atomic theory and all that, and Aristotle was holding them down. That is just ludicrous. People are not thinking. They hate on one person, don't think how that applies to everybody else at the time, and how it's not Aristotle, but it's everyone at the time believed something. Again, ludicrous, illogical, shows a lack of critical thinking. Let's please not do that, for the love of truth. Man. But Galileo was debating with some scholastics. The scholastics blindly read some ancients, didn't think themselves, and their view of things was someone intelligent says it, so it's right. It's written here that the sun goes around the earth. But Galileo knew from Aristotle, and he said himself, he knew from Aristotle that all human reasoning must be placed second to direct experience. And that's a quote from something Galileo said. He said basically, I think it is kind of like, it is less certain that the earth goes around the sun or the sun goes around the earth than the fact that all human reasoning must be placed second to direct experience. And then Newton followed on that. Therein lies what we need to do. Not memorize a bunch of words in education. Not do regurgitate and forget. Not read books. Not focus on imagination. Not put the same thing on the internet. What we need to do, if we care about truth and good human life and success, for the love of our children, for the love of ourselves, for the love of the earth, and living a good life, helping each other out, being good on our own, and being a good team player, being like some ancient people that someone would have to go off on their own and live for a week or two or three to show they can survive, but they can do more. They can be a contributing member of the team. That's what we should do for the love of life, But even way, and something we're not doing yet, even way back, a long time ago, in 1947, in the Morehouse College newspaper, the Maroon Tiger, Martin Luther King Jr. wrote, I'll quote from part of it, read here, education must also train one for quick, resolute, and effective thinking. To think incisively and to think for one's self is very difficult. We are prone to let our mental life become invaded by legions of half-truths, prejudices, and propaganda. At this point, 1947, even then, at this point, I often wonder whether or not education is fulfilling its purpose. A great majority of these so-called educated people do not think logically and scientifically. Even the press, the classroom, the platform, and the pulpit, in many instances, he says, in many instances, not all, in many instances, do not give us objective and unbiased truths. To save man from the morass of propaganda, in my opinion, is one of the chief aims of education. Education must enable one to sift and weigh evidence, to discern the true from the false, the real from the unreal, and the facts from the fiction. The function of education, therefore, is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. But education which stops with efficiency may prove the greatest menace to society. The most dangerous criminal may be the man gifted with reason but with no morals. Unquote. I wouldn't call that reason, though. I'd call that intellect. Reason and rationality is focused on the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. It's not. If someone is really rational, they are not a criminal. That's a contradiction in terms as I see it. Okay, to quote again, quote, we must remember that intelligence is not enough, unquote. Well, now he's using the word intelligence. I didn't notice that at first when I was talking about his use of reason there. But, quote, we must remember that intelligence is not enough. Intelligence plus character, that is the goal of true education. The complete education gives one not only power of concentration, but worthy objectives upon which to concentrate. The broad education will, therefore, transmit to one not only the accumulated knowledge of the race, but also the accumulated experience of social living. If we are not careful, unquote. So this is the last paragraph. He's closing, end of his article or essay. Quote, if we are not careful, our colleges will produce a group of closed-minded, unscientific, illogical propagandists consumed with immoral acts. Be careful, brethren. Be careful, teachers. Unquote. Now, what do you think? Is his prediction come true or not? And, I'm kind of laughing in disdain and sorrow and some things like that. Not because I actually think it's funny. Ha ha ha, look where we are nowadays. I think it's sad. But 1947, quote, if we are not careful, our colleges will produce a group of closed-minded, unscientific, illogical propagandists consumed with immoral acts, unquote. Think about modern culture, and if that if his generalization and his prediction applied. Again, I'm laughing kind of more in, not because I think it's funny or I enjoy it, more in the irony of it, the sorrow of it, some things like that. Because I sure the heck don't like some things. But he's on it, other people are not. That, what he's saying, I think is what we need to do to get education dialed in and done right. As I say, it's not just him, it's not just me. There's plenty of others saying something similar or identical. So, what can we do? First, reason out the conclusion. We should not just take the conclusion, oh, hear these words, I like them, I feel good. I'm going to go proclaim them. We should understand, be able to reach the generalization about this on our own, not just from someone else. And to do that, we need to see some contrasts. Like people say, education is broke. I have this idea to fix it. Well, prove it. Show me some good education that's actually done. And then that's one thing. Tie it to human nature. Education is not whatever we want or feel. It's based on human nature. And that's going to help us get and then we look at what Newton and Galileo and Marie Curie and the dog whisperer and Maria Montessori did. We look at not necessarily what their philosophy was, but what they actually did. And we see here is good education. What characteristics, what principles can I identify in this good education? What are fundamentals of it? What makes it what it is? What's the nature of it, the essence of it? What makes good education be what it actually is? How does it help people? How does it relate to human life? If we just say, oh, we need more imagination. Okay, well, why? Does the human mind really work that way? Does human consciousness really work that way? Is it just imagination? How does that tie to human life and actually doing things? How does that tie to biology? How does that tie to the belief that mind is for movement? How does that tie to the idea that consciousness is a function of an animal? A function to help us survive? You know? We need to think about things like that. If we want to get education right, if we care about humans, if we care about a good life, and that means, knowing and caring about the truth. And we got to think about when there are certain educational systems, what is their philosophy and is it right or wrong? And some people think, oh, I love Plato. Oh, I love this and that. Okay, well, how has that philosophy played out in history? Look at the consequences of Platonic philosophy. Look at what people in that school or people offshoots of it have done. Look at the consequences of their thought. Look at what Aristotle did and look at the consequences of his basic thought. And consider, Plato said, experience in the evidence of the senses lies to us. It's full of illusions and delusions. It's temporary, impermanent, here and now, concrete. And he couldn't figure out, Aristotle could. Aristotle knew that, as Thomas Aquinas said, nothing in the intellect was not first in the senses. Conceptual stuff, as Aristotle knew, and hence Galileo and Newton and others were able to develop science and all these modern sciences. But Aristotle knew that concepts come by abstracting something from the evidence of the senses, from experience. Plato made the mistake of thinking that concepts being universal, timeless, abstract, general, mental, not kind of physical and perceptual, are entirely different than perceptual. So he was wrong. And as you can see, study what happened in history. But look at what he believed, what Aristotle believed, how that would affect education, human government, morality, politics, history, and so on and so forth. It's, so when you're looking at educational system, is it something that dismisses the evidence of the senses? And maybe throws you an example out of pity because they think you can't engage in pure abstraction, you're not smart enough or developed enough. Just because someone uses examples doesn't mean they're being rational in the proper sense of the word. Doesn't mean they're Aristotelian. It just sometimes means they have contempt for you that you can't engage in quote-unquote pure abstraction and think you need that kind of help. Is a system of education Platonic? Is it Kantian, which is in a similar school but worse? Kant, Immanuel Kant, the philosopher, said we could not know reality. And that's even worse than Plato. At least Plato knew that there was some reality, even if he didn't get it right, as Aristotle did. For Kant, all we could know is our own internal consciousness. And so what's going to happen there when you really, he's trying allegedly to defend reason. All that does is produce insanity, people unable to deal with the world, destruction of everything. So learn some essences of philosophies and see what an educational system does and whether it's appropriate to the real world in our life. Like I say, look at different things. What's the philosophy? Does this actually promote human survival? What do they think of reasoning? Just because someone uses the word reason doesn't mean they're talking about the same thing you might be. Okay, then we're going to see what a good educational system is. And as I say, I'd agree with Martin Luther King Jr. There is an objective world. We can know it. We all get knowledge from the evidence of the senses, so every one of us can think on our own. We don't have to be told what to believe by like the philosopher kings of Plato. We can figure it out on our own. We can be right, we can be wrong, we can figure out morality on our own, right or wrong, because we have free will. But education, as he said, quote, education must enable one to sift and weigh evidence, to discern the true from the false, the real from the unreal, and the facts from the fiction, unquote. And so that's what we can do. And then, one more thing, study philosophy, study this, study that, and then study logic. If we're going to see whether an educational system is good or bad and make some decisions on our own and understand what MLK said, we need to know some different educational systems. As I said, we need to know the practical consequences of it, the theoretical underpinnings of it, some different philosophies, and we should know some logic. If we're not taught critical thinking or logic, then do it ourselves. Take some initiative. Be selfish in a rational sense. Not selfish, as some people use it, like doing whatever you feel, like a little 2-year-old. I mean selfish, following yourself, your inner nature. What is it to be a human being? To be selfish in the sense of be true to yourself, be true to your nature, be true to your nature as a self-sovereign, social, rational animal. We are by nature self-sovereign and social. So be true to that, please. Study logic, dig into it for the love of life. Make yourself a better thinker. Make yourself better on your own. And then you are also a more productive member of your tribes. Be like some ancient peoples, be able to go out into any physical or spiritual or metaphorical desert or wilderness and survive on your own and bring back things to help the tribe and the community. That's an important thing. I think the philosophy and the logic that we're missing that'll help you do that. So that's one thing, excuse me, that's really going to help us get education going. We have to do it, please, on our own and then bring it into children and students. If we don't know it, we can't teach it, we can't show it, we're not convinced of the value of it. And logic is about knowing the truth. To have a commitment to the truth as a human, we cannot do that. Impossible without knowing logic. Anybody who dismisses logic and says they're committed to the truth, to dismiss logic, to say you're committed to the truth is a contradiction in terms. Impossible. Logic is about making sure our concepts, it's the methods we have, techniques we've learned so far in human history, techniques of knowing if our concepts, ideas, and generalizations and deductions are true to reality or not. Are we aware of reality or not? So that's, I think, what we should do. if we really want to improve education, and again, don't think of education as some floating abstraction. Really, maybe just say education in brief, but think in your own mind, or sometimes say to other people. It's not merely making education better. Remember the reality of it. What is the meaning of making education better? The meaning is helping train our children to have their ability to have their conceptual thought connected to the real world, so they can engage, they can grasp the truth, they can deal with people, they can judge people right, they can get along, they know how to survive in the world and amongst people. That's basically what it's about. Do we want, so it's not so much of improving education, it's improving the ability, it's destroying, or good or bad education is destroying or aiding our children's ability to survive well in the physical real world and amongst people. People are in the real world too, real world also, but I guess you get the idea. So that's my recommendation. That's what we need to do. I think different things show that. That's evidenced by different things that have happened in human history. If you want to know more about that, get in touch. You can read books on your own. There's stuff out there. I'll try to put some stuff in the description field. Logic, this and that. But, then if you want some training in it, you want some personal help, you can just also hire me for consulting, training in thinking skills, training in logic, study of it, so on and so forth. I'd be glad to help. Like I say, it's helping because it's having, like the word philosophy means a love of truth or a commitment to the truth. That's what I got, and that's what I like to help other people have. Help them think better, learn critical thinking, practice it, learn logic, practice it for the sake of a commitment to the truth, which is what we need to be honest. What is honesty about? A commitment to the truth. What do we need for human survival? A commitment to the truth. Knowing what is out there in the world, how it works, so we can get the things we need to survive and thrive. So if you want to know more about that, please get in touch. We can set up some tutoring and all that. I could train at companies. I could do some consulting, group work, teamwork, private work, but you can also study some on your own. So get out there, please love life, dig in to truth, practice and develop your commitment to the truth, and help our children do the same for a great life. Peace.